You've reached the Signal Watch, movies, television, comics, and more. I'm your host, Ryan Steens. Join me and our cadre of co-contributors as we examine cultural artifacts of the 20th century, boldly explore the 21st, and try to put it all in perspective. Stay tuned. We're gonna try to make this work. Hey everybody, and welcome back to the Signal Watch. As always, I'm your host, Ryan Steens, and with me, freshly returned from the UK, is...
Hello, Simon Day.
Simon, you have just returned from your native England.
Toodle pip, I certainly have, old chap.
Are you full of Her Majesty's spirit and vim and vigor right now?
Well, I have a suitcase that I did fill with tea bags. People will laugh, but that's very true. And I did get a bit sweaty coming through customs in case the dogs went after me, but I made it.
Well, I am happy to have you back. As I expressed to you before you left, I was a little concerned you might not come back, but you are, and that means the fact you had me watch Wild Geese. Is like we're actually going to do the. Well, I guess we could have done it if you'd stayed in England. It just would have been at odd hours.
That's very true. That's very true. Yeah, we would have to be. I think you'd have had to be up early, and I would have had to be up late or something.
Yeah. But this is a very British film, so that's as good of an entrance to it as I can possibly think of. Anyway, but you have selected as one of your canon films, and a movie you talk about all the damn time. You've selected, I never already said the name, but you drop it for us.
Yeah, it's The Wild Geese from 1978, starring Richard Burton, Richard Harris, Roger Moore, and Hardy Kruger. Directed by Andrew V. I think it's McLaglen, and produced by Ewan Lloyd, gentleman producer Ewan Lloyd. Kind of old school blood and guts actioner. Like you say, very British, very British. I think it was the #1 British film of the year when it came out, much to the horror of a lot of critics. But yeah, so my history with this is definitely a canon film for me, because this was one that was shown very regularly on TV during the 80s. I'm sure it kind of went out of fashion sometime in the 90s, but I remember growing up, it's the kind of film you watch with your dad. And then when you get a bit older, it's the kind of film that when you're a teenager, at least in England, and you've come in from the pub, you watch in a slightly hazy state. And then probably when you're even a bit older, you probably sit around with mates, and it's kind of a six-pack film, really. Very, very male-centric. I think there's 3 women in it, and they have 10 lines between them.
That sounds about right.
It's sexist, racist, and homophobic, like all the best films. And I'm joking there, of course. But I will say, like, big spoilers, because we're going to discuss, most of the cast die in this. So please do go and watch it before you listen to this. But yeah, very on PC. But, to be honest, watching it, I'm like, especially with the kind of, the race issue and the South African issue, I think it does a nice job of balancing sides, and, how Hardy Kruger's character is kind of brought round and wowed by the kind of, the African leader.
Yeah. I think that's a great place to start talking about it. Watching it, this is only the second time I've seen it. You introduced me to it probably about 6 years ago.
I think you and I did a Richard Burton double bill, which is also the first time you'd seen Where Eagles Dare.
Yeah. Did we do both of those at the same time?
It was a long afternoon, and there's a lot of Richard Burton doing this for hours, and I haven't had a drink for at least 5 minutes. And it was kind of great. It was a great double bill, actually. And you kind of see kind of Burton, like, I guess, kind of in his prime, although even in Where Eagles Dare, it kind of makes me laugh because even then he's a bit past it. And, he just stands around and does the monologues to confuse the Nazis while Clint Eastwood basically does the action. There's that great scene where Clint Eastwood climbs up the side of the castle, and I think Clint Eastwood actually did it for real. And then Richard Burton kind of gets towed up while he's waving his legs around, pretending he's climbing, and then has the cheek to say to Clint Eastwood, you were a bit slow or something, or hurry up. Whereas in the Wild Geese, they're definitely they play on the fact that they're all kind of like pretty past their kind of prime, and maybe they're getting too old for this shit.
Yeah, it's if you just to kind of recap, I'm hoping you've seen the movie, maybe you haven't, but it's essentially about contemporary 1970s, a lord of some sort who with interest in the copper mining in an African country says he brings in Richard Burton, and he's basically trying to protect his copper interests that are there.
Yeah.
And in order to do this, he feels like he needs to reinstall a president who has kind of disappeared off the face of the earth. He's identified he's in a prison.
He's a little bit Mandela-ish, isn't he? Kind of like.
Yeah. So I also read that it's based on potentially a real story of a guy who'd been the prime minister of Congo.
Yeah.
But it feels very Mandela-ish and looks very Mandela-ish. And I don't think that's a coincidence. I guess I'd put it that way.
Yeah.
But it
so they're trying to really kind of kickstart a civil war, maybe.
Well, that's plan B, which is crazy.
That's
true. If this doesn't work, we overthrow the whole country. So
haven't got anything better to do.
Yeah, so he's hired Richard Burton as a mercenary to go do this, and it did strike me that this is the same plot in many ways as Hired to Kill.
Well, Hard to Kill is obviously the inferior version, the copy. But it does have a lot of the same beats, like you say. It's kind of funny how, Burton is, I love Burton's first scene is he's drinking out of a brown paper bag in the airport. I'm like, are they filming that, or is that just Richard Burton? But then, he's taken to Matheson, great villain, and he has one name, Matheson, played by Stuart Granger, who I think seems to own a bunch of newspapers as well, or know a bunch of newspaper editors, but he's like, I guess, a banker. And he says, here's this plot. I want to go and free this guy. And basically, we're going to use him, get him out of there, and we're going to use him at a later date. And then, of course, it goes into like the recruitment. Burton goes around trying to recruit his crew and plan the mission. Then, of course, they do the mission, and it goes like clockwork. And it would have been a cakewalk, but of course, it would have been quite a short, boring film. And then, of course, they get double crossed by Matheson, who's made a new deal back in England. So the rest of the film is then basically having to fight their way out of Africa.
Right. It's the first time I watched this movie, and I didn't really know what to expect. The pacing of it threw me off quite a bit. They don't even like hit the ground in Africa till 40 minutes into the movie.
Well, it's one of those films that I remember watching on TV, and we always had the news at 10. So movies would always start at 9 o'clock. And it's funny because as a kid, you'd always want your parents to say it was okay for you to stay up, because if you went to bed, you knew you were going to miss the best part of the film. So, for instance, if they showed Alien would finish with them going like, let's just have one last meal before hypersleep. And they would go, Alien continues after news at 10. So then, and with wild geese, I think I'm right in thinking, because I've seen this so many times, that they actually jump out of the plane and then it would go, wild geese is going to continue after News 10. And it's like, well, they're finally in Africa now, so stuff's going to happen.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah, they're but it's when I watched it this time, I was like, okay, I can expect the whole recruiting process.
Yeah.
And it's an interesting format for the film, just because that's their way of getting you invested in the characters. So when everything kind of goes to hell in the third act, or at the turn of it. Yeah.
Well, it's the same thing actually, and it's an old fashioned way of doing it, but it's also like, maybe we should start bringing back, because it's also like Aliens. If you think about Aliens, nothing happens in the first hour of that. I think if you probably turn that on after an hour, they're just about going to look for the colonists, going down all the stairs and stuff. So it's like, it's the same thing, but you've had that hour to meet everybody. And obviously Roger Moore and Richard Harris have their own, kind of separate, longer kind of introductions. I love Roger Moore's, which is like hilarious, because he's at a very cheesy disco 70s party with groovy music, and Eliza Minnelli look-alike in a skin-tight costume. And he's basically unhappy that he's been running drugs to young girls. So he takes out the shortest mafioso nephew, who looks a bit like Dana Carvey, actually.
Well, did you catch that is the son of famed American actor Alan Ladd.
He's very short, and he's wearing an even shorter dressing gown.
Yeah, so Alan Ladd, that was always a thing they had to hide in the films, was that he was like 5'2" or something crazy.
He was the Tom Cruise of his day.
Yeah, absolutely. And so they cast him with like Veronica Lake and like other teeny tiny actresses, so he'd look like, it all averaged out. But whenever he'd be against another actor, he'd be like, "Oh, that guy's a giant of a man or something," and then it's like, "Well, no, that's a guy who's like 6'1", but next to Alan Ladd." So yeah, it was an interesting thing, because I was like, "Man, that guy looks kind of familiar" when I was watching the movie, and then I went and looked, and it's like, well, that's because he shares genes with Alan Ladd.
Well, funnily, there's another famous kind of like offspring in this, which is Stanley Baker from Zulu, the main guy in Zulu.
Yeah.
His son is in it. Glim Baker, who plays, let me consult me old notes, who plays, is it Espirito? Who's the young white mercenary guy. And
right. Yeah.
He joked, and you can kind of tell once you know, because he's kind of got the same eyes. But he kind of joked that he only lasted so long in this film because he was one of the few young people who was able to carry Lynn Barney, compared to all the old guys like Richard Burton. So he basically said, "Yeah, I lasted quite a long time in that film because like I could actually carry him on my back for action scenes." But going back to Roger Moore though, I kind of love this because this is Roger Moore kind of being more Bond than he ever got to be as Bond. He's kind of like really kills them in a nasty way, because he makes them eat the cocaine, and then he goes, there's no point praying for a stomach pump because I laced that with arsenic.
Yeah, he says something about like, you've got about 20 minutes, and it's cold. I mean, but you understand where it's coming from.
Yeah, it's still Roger Moore.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, he doesn't have a ton to do in this movie, but he makes everything he does count for sure.
Well, interestingly, Roger Moore did something very unstar-like at the start of this, and he said, "Take some of my lines out." And the producer said, "Well, why?" Because Roger Moore was probably the biggest box office draw at the time, because of Bond. And he said, "Look, you got Richard Harris and Richard Burton. I'm not going to act against them. Just kind of have me in the background." Which is kind of like, I think that says something for Roger Moore being quite humble. That's quite nice.
It's good to know your limitations too.
Did those guys chew the scenery? I'll just waggle my eyebrow in the background.
Yeah. I mean, it kind of gives him the kind of cool, confident, thing that he brings to a movie anyway, and he gets to just kind of ride that through the film.
And I think he still gets the funniest lines. I mean, I love the like where the father, the priest, is swearing at them, and he goes, "That kind of talk could get back to the Vatican, Father." Or like later when he goes, like, "Was it? You better get out of here before you get your sainthood shot off." So he's still got the best quips around.
Yeah. The Richard, you said like Harris is in the movie, and I realized, and it made me sad that Jared Harris was not actually cast as the child in the movie. And I don't know how old Jared Harris would have been at that point, but it's like to actually have like a kid who looked exactly like the dad sitting there going, "Yes, Papa,"
with a beard. He probably wouldn't have been that far off age-wise, I don't think.
That's what I was thinking, is he was probably like 12 or something at that point.
But I guess he wouldn't have been an actor at that point, whereas this kid was obviously a child actor. Although this kid is like a little bit grating, I must admit.
Oh, yeah. He's absolutely like, "I'm perfect.
Yeah, Daddy.
Why do you work so hard for me, Papa?
Don't get killed, Daddy. I don't want to end up as Richard Burton's wine waiter at his house." But yeah, nice, and terrible perm as well. That perm is kind of permanent,
Oh, poor Emil. I didn't look up what happened to that actor.
He never got his ski trip.
He never did. "I can't go to Switzerland, Papa."
Rich spoiled git. So yes, he didn't know his mother was a whore when they laughed. But yeah, no. So yeah, apart from him though, it's a pretty good cast, and it's Roger Moore gets a nice introduction. Richard Harris gets a lovely introduction, and I love the bit where, first of all he's like, "I'm not doing that anymore. I'm getting too old, and by the way, so are you," and stuff. And I'm not interested. Please don't spoil. Seeing you again. And then of course Richard Burton very sneakily says, "Well, just help me plan this. Just show me how to get into this." And then it just cuts. It's a very nice cut to him going, "I've got Ray for Janders."
Yeah, I really like that part. I really thought that was a really smart bit of writing and editing. It did everything it needed to do. And they cut short the whole like having to sell thing. It was a nice beat.
Yeah. And also, I think you kind of get to see Richard Harris is kind of the heart of it, which makes what happens at the end, such a sucker punch, because, he's like everybody through the film mentions, he's the moral one. He's the nice guy. And actually, he'd have been okay at the end if he hadn't helped the other guy on the plane.
Oh, yeah, 100%. Yeah. And part of me was like, I know everyone's scared, but he's also like the oldest one there. Surely the young guy should be like shoving him up into the plane. But yeah, no, it's the casting on it. It must have been really interesting, like deciding how they were going to bring the folks in, bring in Roger Moore, bring in Richard Burton, and bring in Harris. And I did read something about how like Harris had been. Yeah. Talk about that.
Yeah, well, he was supposed to do the Richard Harris part of Janders, but I think he pulled the old Hollywood style thing and started expanding the part and rewriting it and trying to make himself basically the star, And I'm sure that didn't go down too well. So they kind of got rid of him. But I think Richard Harris came in pretty late. And I know Joseph Cotton was originally going to be Matheson, but for some reason he couldn't do it. And there was a few other people they threw around, like Robert Shaw for the Burton part. But I think originally Burton wasn't very happy with the script. But then once he knew Richard Harris was doing it, they were a bit crafty because they kind of sold each actor on, well, he's going to do it. So they were like, well, I guess if he's going to do it, it's okay.
Yeah.
So, and actually, it's funny because that kind of links into the fact that this was also one of the first films, which is like a general practice now, that they pre-sold on the stars and the concept. So, so they pulled up the old kind of like, here we go, we're going to sell this. And then they got the backing, as opposed to, the traditional way of having the money and then making the film.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It also was the last film Allied Artists actually made. And I know they went bankrupt, and that's why it kind of bombed in the US, because they couldn't really put it out or promote it over here. Whereas it was like a huge hit in Europe and England.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's not well known over here. And I would think in 78, between Moore, Harris and Burton, that would have been enough to make it at least, make it a middling hit, if not a bigger hit.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, because I'm not so sure about Harris, but I know Burton was making a lot of films then, pretty big films. And of course, Roger Moore was about halfway through his tenure as Bond. So, it should have had a lot more firepower than it did, really.
All I know is I knew who Harris was growing up, and I didn't really know who Burton was till like 8th or 9th grade.
Yeah.
And I don't know why I knew who Richard Harris was. I have not a clue what I watched him in.
Walker the Killer Whale and Tarzan the Ape Man and classics like that.
I think so, yeah. But I don't ever remember not knowing who he was. Versus Burton, I remember finding out who he was through like reading about Liz Taylor. And kind of going, oh, okay. So there was this guy who was this really good actor, and all right.
Yeah. Well, talking about those guys, so they were kind of, they were still employable, but they had to both sign a contract to say they wouldn't drink during the course of this film. And I think Burton actually took that pretty seriously. But like Harris apparently fell off the wagon at the end and trashed his hotel room at the Savoy. So he ended up using half his fee for that. But they kind of had a guarantee where they said you're going to lose half your fee if you take a drink. And they had to sign contracts because they'd had like big problems on previous films.
Oh, Jesus.
Leading to Roger Moore quipping afterwards, I was the only wild one because both Richards weren't allowed to drink and Hardy Kruger wouldn't come out of his hotel room with his girlfriend. So Roger Moore was the only one who actually did any drinking, I think.
So what else was Hardy Kruger in? Because his face is super familiar to me, but I can't pinpoint him.
I know him from the original Flight of the Phoenix, where he's the model plane maker who actually fixes their planes so they can get out of the desert. But he was in a lot of films, and probably a lot of like foreign films, I would think, German films. Because he's a German actor, so I'm sure he pops up in all movies as German officers as well and stuff.
Yeah, and that's what I'm thinking, because all I saw was he'd actually passed in the States, so he must have retired to like Palm Springs or something like that. But he just seems super familiar, but not someone like I'd seen since like 1990 or something like that. So,
well, he had a bit of he was a bit annoyed with the final product because he said he loved the producer, Ewan Lloyd, but he said the director, Andrew V. McLaglen, was kind of like a Western director. And he said, and he kept cutting away from my reactions. So he lost a lot of the power of the character of Peter changing his point of view as he got to know Limbani. Because he kind of starts off, a bore. He's very discontented. He just wants to go back and buy a farm in Africa. Doesn't really trust the blacks. It's very kind of like, that you're trying to push out the white people. We have as much right to be here as you. You guys have spoilt this country. And then slowly he's kind of convinced by this, very charismatic leader that actually, these races need to work together for the benefit of the country. And I think it's kind of lovely, although it's very on PC these days, how he goes from calling him Kaffir to like, come on, bloke. And then, don't die when he's actually dying himself at the end,
Yeah, no. And I when I was first rewatching this movie, I was kind of like, man, this is so baked into, certain attitudes about colonialism and, keeping one foot in the, and because I couldn't quite remember the movie super well. My assumption is we were having a few drinks when we were watching it the first time. And so I was like, yeah, I don't really remember, I remember them getting the president out and all that, but I couldn't remember exactly what the plot was. And I think it's fair to say, like, Burton's character is intentionally, he's in it for money. You have there's no illusions about his like actual morality. His morality is you do what you need to do to kind of get by. And obviously this isn't going particularly well for me when I'm not being a mercenary.
No, I mean, he says I'm out of word drunk. And he basically, really, he says, apart from having loyalty for his friends, because he says, I think he says about Roger Moore, he says, he's my friend, I don't have many left. But, his wife's died, his kids aren't talking to him. And I think, his arc in the film is, I guess, he kind of buys into the Limbani stuff as well. But, of course, because he promises, Rafer, that he'll look after the son, that does give him a purpose at the end of the film.
Yeah. And like you said earlier, Harris's character is the one who's like the moral compass for at least the kind of British contingent as they're getting everything together. That said, their whole plan for getting the president out is go in. They go in and exterminate people like insects. It is buck wild to watch. Like, you would never get away with that now.
No, I mean, I even compared to like 80s actions, like Arnie stuff, like really violent stuff, I'm still like, shit, they've just like gassed about 200 soldiers.
Yeah. So if you haven't watched the movie, their plan is like, okay, we have to infiltrate this, it's basically a barracks somewhere in the middle of the veldt. And they knock out the sentries, which you always have to do in a war movie, right? But when they go in, they're like, well, it's like 200 to 50 or something, and those are overwhelming odds. Like, well, everyone's going to be asleep in our day for night, so they just go in literally with what look like exterminator tanks and are spraying dudes in the face as they're waking up. Yeah, with cyanide. Yeah, and I was watching it, just going like, this is the good guy of the film who's doing this.
Oh yeah. No, it's. I mean, for the time, it would have been pretty gritty. And I think Burton had reservations doing the script because he went, I don't want to glorify mercenaries, because this was based on a book, I think called The Thin White Line, by a guy called Daniel Carney, and also kind of based on the experiences of Mad Mike Hoare, who became like a kind of like, he came in and I guess oversaw the film and kind of like, told them what was realistic and what wasn't. So actually, you had real mercenaries in the cast. I think the guy who plays Tosh with the crazy moustache, who's he's the one that grabs Sandy, the sergeant major, and goes, "He's not dead, sir." And Richard Burton goes, "He is, leave him." He was a real mercenary in real life.
Oh, that's crazy.
And actually, he's got a funny story where he walked into the room for the interview scene, and of course, there's the four main people. There's the two, Richard Harris, Richard Burton, Roger Moore, and Hardy Kruger behind a desk. And he said he totally dried up on his lines because he was like, shit, I'm a soldier. What am I doing? looking at these 4 stars. And Richard Burton had to take him aside and have a chat with him and say, just relax,
But you could totally see how that would happen. Like, you go in like totally confident and you realize you're sitting across from the guys you watch at the cinema.
Yeah.
And just like, what is happening? Your head would just be spinning.
Oh yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely crazy. Speaking of which, that's a great scene where we meet some of the other characters, like Whitty, the medic, played by Kenneth Griffiths, who I think you and Lloyd, the producer, said to him, are you okay, playing a homosexual? And Kenneth Griffith said, yeah, some of my best friends like gay. You know, I have absolutely no problem. So, you know, I think he does a very nice job with that role as well, where, you know, it's a little bit camp and it is a little bit, you know, but to be honest, I've met a lot more camp kind of gay guys in my life.
I'll say I think it's within the spectrum of being like it's not like crazy. It makes
it's a very sympathetic portrayal as well.
Yeah.
And I think he goes out like a kind of master as well, you know. Where he's like, you know, I'm just holding the fort, you know, it's fantastic. Okay. But yeah, we have him. We have Jesse, the young kind of like African American guy, who's joking that, you know, he can't afford a haircut.
Right. He has to borrow the 10 to get a haircut. Yeah.
And then we have Jock, the old boxer, who's like, you know, some of the guys I hear are still hearing bells, you know, 20 years later. But, you know, but it's definitely like, you know, I think even watching as a kid, I was very aware of the fact that these guys are kind of too old to be doing this, because I guess these guys are all supposed to be in their mid-50s, maybe even kind of approaching 60. So it's kind of like, you know, should they really still be doing this? Probably not, you know. It's
a really interesting unspoken thing in the film.
It's a bit like the Wild Bunch, isn't it? A little bit like the Wild Bunch.
That was what I was thinking when I was watching it this time. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, you know, that one mission too far, maybe. You know, especially that scene with, you know, the Sergeant Major, you know, Sandy, where he goes around to his house and he's like, you know, how's retirement? And then his wife comes out and she's, you know, she's visibly upset that he's there because she knows he's going to take him away.
And rightfully so. The wife was right, which is what I thought immediately at the end of the
film. Yeah, Richard Burton will get you killed in a foreign country. Horrible.
Never go to a second location with Richard Burton. Yeah, it's an interesting thing too, because you think about like, okay, these guys then, if it's 1978, they were probably all born in like 1930.
Yeah.
So kind of like, what were they actually involved with the military in their, you know, if you're talking like, you know, 1950 or so, that got them all geared up for all this, because it's post World War II.
Yeah.
And I don't honestly know that much about what was going on with British military forces through the 50s, because I don't think there was much involvement in Korea.
I guess the Suez Canal.
Right. Okay.
But it was more kind of failures, really. You know, it was actually the kind of depletion of, I guess, like the might of the army, really.
Yeah.
So, you know, it was kind of going. I mean, I guess Ireland as well. But I mean, like, you know, apart from policing around the world, yeah. I mean, if you were getting too old to be in the army, it's interesting what you would have done, because like these guys are like, well, we tried civilian life, and it, you know, we're really not made for it, or we're not enjoying it, or we're not very good at it.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's, you know, and it gives a believable incentive for all of these guys at this age to kind of go, well, you know, we're going off with Richard Burton. It's, you know, one more of these, you know, it'll be our last hurrah. It'll be a party, and it frankly should have been, until they get, you know, everything turned around on them. But it was part of what I was thinking of as far as like, you know, end of colonialism and Britain, and kind of the feeling, you know, and by the way, you know, it's not like the US's hands were clean at this point in Africa.
Oh no.
So, but going in and kind of doing the adventuring and like, what can we do to, you know, fight the commies through proxy and, you know, everything else that was going on at that point.
Yeah. Well, it's also like you were saying, you know, it kind of switches gears, you know, when they do get double crossed, because of course, you know, they could have been out of there and home free, you know. And then, of course, it starts getting messy, because it's like, well, what do we do? And Richard Harris has got that great speech about, you know, well, we can't go this way because of this. And we can't go this way because of this. So let's go to his village and try to start a civil war. You know, almost as like, you know, at best a distraction so we can get out there, and at worst we might even win it.
Right? Yeah, and it's interesting because it's a movie that is about the meticulous planning, and they did plan for everything, but that they would be double crossed. So there is no secondary exit.
But if they'd have seen as many films as you and I have, they'd have known, don't trust the money guy. Don't trust the George Kennedy or the Stuart Granger.
But yeah, so it does end up with them having to then traverse and with a wounded president. And that's when you do get the kind of conversations between Hardy Kruger and the president. And it is unfortunate that because I hate to characterize it as too clunky. Because I think that there's some really nice stuff in there. And
it's very on the nose, isn't it?
But it ends up feeling very on the nose. And it would have been nice for it not just to be like Hardy Kruger's just kind of suddenly saying, you know what, I like how you talk, sir, which is kind of how it plays now. I would have liked to have seen those reaction shots from him that he said got cut out.
Yeah. I mean, again, I think you just feel every death in this. So I think like we were saying, having that first hour of getting to know the characters, when they start getting taken out in order of importance, it's you start really feeling it every time. And I remember first time I watched as a kid, I was like, anybody could die. Roger Moore could die in this,
Yeah, and nothing feels safe. Like after you enter into the back third. Yeah,
definitely, because they're massively outnumbered, and they are running low on ammunition and stuff, and then you kind of have the final, I guess, like 20 minutes where they basically make their way from his village to the plane. And that's got some great stuff from Frank Finlay as well as the preacher. Frank Finlay, who you might remember from Life Force, because you said he's been like Peter Cushing. He's Peter Cushing in Life Force.
Yes. Okay.
So he turns up and just swears them, and Richard Boone goes, "Shut your face! I can swear more than you." But he kind of tells them where there's an old plane. Which again, they kind of have to get to that and get on it, which is like, and I think so I've been asked to do this, do Wild Geese as a podcast by a couple of British mates who are my age, because like I said, I think we all grew up watching it. And if you're a British person, or if you've seen this over the years, a lot of times, however many times you've seen it, at the end, you're always like, run faster, Richard Harris. This time you'll get on the plane. Because that is just like a nasty rug pull right at the end.
Yeah, it has a lot of impact, and there's some. I wouldn't say this movie's cinematography like knocks my socks off.
No, it's really meat and potatoes, isn't it?
Yeah, but there is the shot of Harris actually getting shot, which you can tell was an accident, but they were like, "Ooh, we're using that." Yeah, because the blood ends up on the lens in the shot, and they cut it just after it splatters.
Yeah,
and it's so you have no question of he'll walk away from that. He'll put a little dirt on it, and he'll be fine.
Oh yeah, yeah. Compare this to and this I mean, I guess overall, also, how many decent mercenary films are there? I mean, probably you can only come up with a handful. Just compare this to The Expendables, where Dolph Lundgren comes back at the end and goes like, "Well, I'm all bed now, got my grapes, in my hospital bed," and they're like, "Yeah, you crazy bastard, you try to kill us." Compare that to, the fact that at the end of this, there's only 11 of them left, I think.
Yeah. It's
I wouldn't be surprised if James Cameron didn't watch this before Aliens, to be honest, because it is like, kind of similar.
I'm absolutely certain that James Cameron has seen this movie. I have absolutely no doubt.
I like to think he's got a big poster of Roger Moore in his wall, smoking a huge cigar. I know I would. I know I would.
But yeah, and to that end, and I remember when I went to go see Black Hawk Down the first time. I think I've talked about this on the podcast before, but when I went to go see Black Hawk Down, like there was a certain disassociation of all of the Americans being treated as kind of the heroes just by virtue of showing up and being Americans. And then
like Team America with the, was it Jappa 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 kind of
yeah. And it's just like kind of like, oh, we're going to treat the actual locals. And when I was watching, I was like, oh my God, Black Hawk Down feels like another Aliens movie because they're treating the people as if they're these things that are popping out at them.
Yeah.
And not as actual humans through the whole thing. And this movie kind of suffers from that a bit.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the only excuse this has is it's about 20 years before Black Hawk Down.
Yeah.
Or 30 years, you know, so it's the kind of same thing we were saying about Zulu, where really, you know, yeah, it's just targets. These are the targets to be avoided, really. But although part of me was thinking, you know, it would be nice to have another kind of villain in Africa, like, you know, a leader. And we kind of get that brief shot of that fat white guy kind of saying, you know, to his troops, well, we're going to kind of do this and cut them off here. But that's all we have. But then another part of me is like, well, maybe you don't need that, you know, because really, you know, they're in trouble anyway. So if you kept cutting away to this guy kind of like, you know, laughing, cackling manically or whatever, I don't know if it would really help the film. But you're right. They are kind of faceless. You know, they are basically exactly the same as Alien. You know, they're just popping up all over the place. These big kind of black troops.
Yeah.
It's a swarm, unending swarm, really.
Yeah. And you know, part of me understands, like, look, the focus of the movie is on the arcs, what changes within, you know, especially within Richard Burton, of course.
Yeah.
But also you get to see the potential for change that's cut short because it's a 70s movie, where, you know, we could have had lovely change if these two had, you know, Hardy Kruger and the president had survived and held hands and, you know, marched into the future together. But it's the senseless violence and all that. And to me, that's really kind of in a lot of ways, kind of the heart of this movie, as much as Richard Harris's, you know, more familiar, you know, like that's like the home fires thing versus the overall arc of, like, you know, if Burton's character is also getting sold on it, you managed to sell freaking Mr. Boar from South Africa on this vision too. Like, but the stupid violence, and it's a lot of it's being manipulated by people sitting, you know, in for some reason, baby blue, you know, billiard rooms or whatever.
People don't get their hands dirty, basically.
Yeah. And I think that there's so much kind of baked into those ideas that I think this movie just doesn't feel like it needs to spell out.
Yeah.
That I think now you would have to, if you were to remake this, you'd have, it's kind of how like West Side Story had to explain the 50s in New York to people a whole lot more on the remake than in the original. They're like, well, you all know this because you live in the 50s. But you would have to do a lot more, I think, explaining of what was going on politically at this time. And it helps to be a little older watching this movie and being a little more historically and politically savvy to get, you know, what all the pieces are. But it's, you know, it's the whole movie up and down. I mean, it might be a 6-packer to watch with your buddies, but it's also like, it's a tragedy. It's straight up. I mean, there's no getting around it.
Yeah. I think, I mean, it's very true what you say. And I couldn't really see this being made now anyway, because they just wouldn't allow it. They wouldn't allow like an all-male cast. They wouldn't allow the kind of language. They wouldn't allow the representation without a lot of fine-tuning of like, well, we're going to see the African's point of view.
Mm-hmm.
You know, this is very much old school original gangster stuff. And very clunky in parts, but I think incredibly entertaining. You know, I love to. I love the end. You know, when they're trying to get on the plane. Of course, Richard Harris, you know, he's nearly on there. And then he gets shot in the leg and just loses his grip. And then, of course, you know, he's like, "Kill me," because, you know, if they get hold of me, they're going to chop me to bits. And and it's it's the Richard Burton going, stop replying. It's like, and Roger Moore going, I can't. We're not going to get out of here if I slow down. So that's all fantastic stuff. I always like to imagine Richard Burton running for the plane with a load of drinks trolley. Quick, get the whiskey on board. But then it's like, it's kind of like, and then they escape, and away they go, leaving all these bodies littered. And then of course we have the denouement back in London with obviously kind of like facing off and dealing with the whole reason for this, which is Matheson, Stuart Granger, who apparently years before Burton had an affair with his wife, so they genuinely hated each other.
Oh my God.
So not much acting going on in those scenes either, I don't think, really. But that's great as well, because Stuart Granger's really bluffing it out, and he's like, well, you better kill me then. And it's only last minute that he's like, oh shit.
Yeah, it's an interesting scene in that.
Great speech as well about Burton. I was going to go into all these facts about loyalty of the relationship between employee and mercenary and friendship and stuff, and now I'm here. I don't really care.
I think Matheson plays the scene with that character is so good because he genuinely believes, even to the point of the bullet going into him, he's going to talk his way out of this, because he's always talked his way out of it. Well,
money can solve everything,
right? Yeah.
And actually, up to that point, maybe it could for Burton, but he's kind of, he's obviously stepped over the line, killing his friend.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, it's him completely, not Burton, Matheson, completely misreading the situation of what's about to happen. He really thinks he's there to negotiate, and so it's such a good little beat there where he the realization is after the bullet's in him.
Yeah.
I guess I'm dead now.
He does a great thing the people who got shot in 70s movies did, where their hair stands on end.
I didn't notice that. I did not notice that.
It kind of happens in a couple of films. Their hair stands on end when they're on the floor.
That's probably because there's an electric shock on the squid.
They've been tasered. So I totally recommend this film. Obviously, do you want some funny wild geese facts?
I would love some wild geese facts.
So Richard Harris, as a joke, put a rubber snake in Roger Moore's hotel room.
Oh God!
Hoping he'd scream, and Roger Moore didn't scream, but he put a live snake in Richard Harris's hotel room, and Richard Harris did scream. And then Richard Harris said to Richard Burton, if you ever want to have a drink, if you ever have an urge to have a drink, jump up and down. It makes me feel better. So for the entire duration of the film, both Richards were seen hopping around like kangaroos at various points. Richard Harris also wanted Oliver Reed, his mate, to be in the film. And the producer, Ewan Lloyd, went, no, I think we're already pushing our luck. Which I totally agree with. I think that's about it. I also like Ewan Lloyd also kind of like actually mortgaged his house and said he sold his wife's jewelry. I don't know whether she knew about it. Sold his wife's jewelry and fur coat and car to be able to afford the pre-pitch to the studio, the pre-sales pitch. So he had everything kind of riding on this. And he went on to, I think he also kind of went on to produce North Sea Hijack and the Seawolves after this.
I'd like to see the Seawolves at some point. I've never seen it.
Seawolves is very similar to this. It's got a slightly different flavor because it's got Gregory Peck in as well. So it's Gregory Peck, Roger Moore, and David Niven are the leads. And again, based on a true story of like this old retired guard. They were kind of brought out on a secret mission in World War II because, they just looked like a bunch of old men on a drunk cruise. And actually they were trying to blow up a battleship. Interestingly, that was going to be, they wanted to reunite Richard Burton, Richard Harris, and Roger Moore for that. I'm kind of glad they didn't, because I think it would have been too similar to this. And I think having Gregory Peck in there and David Niven gives it a bit of a different flavor.
Yeah.
But yeah, very enjoyable kind of romp that as well. And actually, a lot of people in this did bleed over. Like, I think the guy who plays a sergeant major is in it, and the guy who plays Jock is in it. And again, Roy Budd did the music. Should also mention the fact that Maurice Binder, who did all the Bond film opening credits up to the 80s, also did the opening credits for this, which is why it looks a bit like a Bond film with all.
I forgot to mention the music at the opening and closing is very 1978 and crazy, and seems to have nothing to do with the actual movie.
Yeah, yes, they kind of got Joan Armitage on there to kind of like do the song, almost like a love song, really.
Yeah.
But yeah, you know, I love this movie. You know, I've got the poster. I think I've got a T-shirt of it somewhere as well. I
find it interesting that every time I've been like, but what about Wild Geese 2? You're like, absolutely not.
Oh, well, I mean, in brief, I have seen Wild Geese 2. It's appalling. It was very hobbled from the start because Richard Burton died 2 days before it started, and he was going to reprise his role. So they had to scramble, obviously, to find another lead actor.
Oh my God.
It. I'm not even sure if Roger Moore was supposed to be in it, but he ended up not being in it either. And it's a totally different plot, saying Europe. It's about breaking out Hess and getting him in front of cameras. So it's like going to Germany and kind of almost doing like a prison break. And it's just deathly dull. So I don't know if, like, you know, even having Burton in it would have saved it. But whatever magic there was in this, it just didn't rub off. It's kind of like a Highlander 2 type situation.
Right,
you know what I mean?
Yeah, and the only reason I'd ever brought it up was like, well, one, you like Wild Geese, and then I saw Ingrid Pitt was in it, and I was like, oh, well, we should watch that. And you were like, absolutely not. So
no, it's got Scott Glenn being Scott Glenn at the time, which is like one facial expression, you know. And Edward Fox, I think, plays who's supposed to be Richard Burton's brother.
Oh God, they go for that old chestnut. Okay.
But and also there's a line that really pissed me off, actually, I think, when I saw it, which is like, they kind of mention Richard Burton. They go, oh yeah, he died in Africa. And I'm like, well, did he on another mission? Or do they think he died from the Wild Geese? Or
right. Yeah.
Why tease me with that? Torment me with that. So yeah, it's honestly not worth seeing. This was kind of a one and done, really. But yeah, you know, I love this film. Like I say, you know, it's definitely, I watch it every couple of years. Very glad you've seen it again. And for me, it's up there with, you know, if I want to stick on a fun Richard Burton movie, it's probably this or Where Eagles Dare.
Well, I was really glad we finally got to it. I'm kind of shocked it took us this long, but I think, you know, now must have been the right time for it. But yeah, I enjoyed watching it again. I enjoyed kind of like blowing away some of my own expectations I was setting in my head for it at the beginning as I got going again. And it, you know, to see these guys kind of at this point in their career, is enjoyable, and while it's not stylized action,
it's kind of realistic.
Yeah,
really.
I think it's kind of this interesting, like, look, you basically are people with machine guns pointing them at each other and trying to find stuff to hide behind. And I think that it's interesting to see an action movie that acknowledges that.
Well, it's also, you know, it plays into their age. It isn't like, you know, and especially in these days where everybody's 20-year-old and perfect at everything. You know, I'm a 20-year-old and I'm like a trained colonel. And it's like, what the fuck? When did you start training? You're 8?
Colonel Baby Man, thank God you're here.
You know, and it kind of gives me hope, you know, because of course everybody's getting younger and younger. So it's nice seeing people who are still older than me doing stuff. But, I think Richard Harris summed it up best because, he said it was more like a summer holiday than shooting a film. He said, I've made a bunch of terrible films lately, but this was great because, he said to Richard Burton one day, he said, isn't this just like being a child? Isn't this like when you were in the woods with a stick, shooting at Germans from behind a tree? And Richard Burton said, yeah, it's great. So, so I think it kind of like, especially for maybe boys, it kind of captures that little bit of, play we had when we were kids.
Yeah. I could definitely see that. Well, thanks for bringing it back to us. And if you have not seen Wild Geese, it is actually available right now. It is April of 2022. It is free if you have Amazon Prime to stream, which is how I watched it. I was planning to go rent it and noticed it was available for free. Nice. So go find it there. I think it might also be on HBO Max if you go look there, but I'm not positive about that one. But it's not hard to find. I'll put it that way.
I think I've got a nice double disc Blu-ray as well for about $10 with quite a few extras on. So nice. If you like that on your shelf, you can get hold of that pretty easily as well.
Well, thank you, Simon. And with that, we will bid you adieu. And Simon and I will be back again very, very soon.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Sad are the eyes, yet no tears. The flight of the wild geese brings a new hope. Rescue from all this, old friends and those newly found. What chance to make it last when there's danger all around and reason just up.
That about wraps it up for this edition of The Signal Watch, a production of the League of Melbotus. Thanks for sticking with us. If you enjoyed the podcast, we invite you to drop on by the Signal Watch blog, where you'll find write-ups of a wide variety of movies and more. We'd love to hear from you, so find us online and let us know what you think. Whether you prefer email, blog comments, or social media, we'll be happy to hear from you. We'll be back soon with more exceedingly high-quality content. So, until next time, God damn it, babies, you've got to be kind.